What is up, guys? Well, the big horror release last weekend was Zach Cregger's follow-up to Barbarian, which is titled Weapons. I did a full spoiler-free review of the film, highly enjoyed it. I was actually trying my best to go see it a second time this weekend. Did not get a chance to do that, which is why this video is coming out about a day or so after I wanted to get it out. But nonetheless, I did want to go through this film again and go through each of the different characters of the different events and give all of my spoiler-filled thoughts, since the couple of little nitpicks, couple of mixed elements, and even a few of my negatives, I couldn't really elaborate on too much without risking spoiling the film. So with that said, obviously, if you've not seen this film, I highly recommend you check out my spoiler-free review, as well as the film itself. It is one of my favorites of the year. Do not let me ruin the movie for you, but if you've seen the film, or if you're just one of those people that don't care about spoilers, we're going to get into it right now, and I'm basically going to follow the exact format of the film, where I'll talk about the intro of the movie, the voiceover, and then we'll get into each of the different characters in the order that the film gives us their story and their perspective. So the entire setup of Weapons, which is given to us in a bit of an exposition dump in a voiceover narration by an unnamed child, sounds like a little girl. And by the end of the film, the identity of this narrator is never hinted at. There's some people that theorize that it is one of the kids. I've seen a number of people say that it's Alex, who is basically the lead kid in the film, which I don't agree with that at all. The voices don't match, and he also, the narrator talks about Alex, so if it's him, he's talking in third person. I think that was just a quick little mistake, but could be one of the kids that was actually a part of this event, or it could just be a kid that lives in the neighborhood years later, and this is like a town urban legend or something like that. A lot of different interpretations that you can have. It's something that doesn't affect my experience with the film, but I did want to know who the narrator was, or at least have some kind of a hint at who it was. For me, it's just a little bit odd to be experiencing this story from the perspective of somebody, and we have no idea who they are in relation to the story. But nonetheless, you have this girl, this child who is narrating, basically saying that years ago, this thing happened in their town where 17 kids that all went to the same classroom, all got up out of their bed, opened their front door, and darted off into the darkness at 2:17 a.m. And all the kids are like caught on different security camera footage. They have their arms out. A lot of people have made jokes about the Naruto run, or is it Naruto run? I don't watch anime, guys. I made the joke myself, and I couldn't find a definitive answer on how to pronounce it. But nonetheless, you have them with their arms darting out, just going out into the woods, the darkness, into the streets. And the town is basically in shambles after this, where you only had one child by the name of Alex Lilly, as well as the teacher, Justine, who are there that show up to school the next day to find that everybody else is gone. And that's basically what kicks off the entire thing. There's an added detail in there where the narrating child says something along the lines of authorities could never figure out a plausible explanation for what happened, so they kind of just buried it to not look incompetent. So that's what kind of leads me to believe that this is just a child telling about this legend in their town years later. That's my best guess of who it is. And I'll say that about the film. A lot of the things that I'm going to talk about that I put in the mix or the negative, there's enough there for you to draw some kind of a conclusion for. It's not like the movie leaves you completely abandoned. And I enjoy that. Sometimes I like to have things spelled out a little bit more for me. Sometimes I like to be able to go down rabbit trails and come up with my own little conclusions and have those debates with people. Every film is a little bit different depending on how successful they are, how interested I am in the answers or lack of answers. Now, really quick before we move on to the characters and the plot of the film, the best weapon that you can have in your arsenal is Rincon Essential Open Earbuds. So check out the sponsor of today's video, Rincon. Just like a lot of you, I love listening to music and podcasts and YouTube videos while I'm doing things all around the house. But the problems that I run into is that before long, any earbuds or headphones is eventually going to start to get uncomfortable on your head. And anytime I decide to cut off my hearing from the rest of the house, that's the exact moment my kids or my dogs decide to get into something that they shouldn't. Well, now with Rincon's Essential Open Earbuds, those problems are problems of the past. The Essential Open Earbuds are so comfortable that I literally forget that I'm even wearing them. They're built for life on the go, so they slip on effortlessly and stay there comfortably all day long. And because they don't block out the world, I can stay tuned into all of my surroundings, whether that's keeping an ear out for traffic while I'm walking, listening for my name to be called at a cafe, or keeping them kids in line. And these babies got 8 hours of battery life per charge and a total of 36 hours with the case that is capable of wireless charging. They're also IPX5 splash proof, so rain, sweat, even your shower can't stop them. So if you're looking for a pair of earbuds that move with you, the Essential Open earbuds are the way to go. So go to buyraycon.com/Cody Leach Open to get 20% off your order of Essential Open earbuds. That's buyraycon.com/Cody Leach Open for 20% off. And thank you so much to Raycon for sponsoring today's video. So after our opening narration closes out, we start with our very first character and title card, which is Justine, who is the teacher who was in charge of this class where all 17 of these kids disappeared from. And we open up the film with her at this little school assembly, this little town hall meeting where all the different parents of the town, most of which, if not all of which, are parents of the missing kids, are basically demanding answers. And so it's a little bit of a gathering where they're kind of grieving together. And as Justine walks up to the microphone to express her distress over the situation, a character who is played by Josh Brolin stands up and starts to point the finger at her and says, "We need answers. This is ridiculous. Like, how did all of them disappear from the same classroom? What's going on in that classroom? Why was it only her kids? We need to know more about this." And very quickly, you have Benedict Wong, who comes up, who's a character named Marcus, who's like the principal of the school, and kind of gets her away from the microphone, tries to defuse the situation, and then trying to escort her outside to her vehicle while there's a mob of angry, distressed parents coming after her. Justine very quickly goes to the liquor store and starts to load up on a bunch of different alcohol, which is, one of her coping mechanisms. Something that is a little bit of a recurring theme in the movie is how people process grief or a distressing situation. Luckily, this is a film that's not exploring trauma. Grief is kind of its ugly cousin, but it's a different thing. I'm so fucking over the trauma horror stuff, but this is her way of dealing with the situation is to basically drown herself into a bottle. And so it also starts to set up the building blocks of a little bit of her past where she was very much an alcoholic. And at some point, she goes home. She starts to hear this eerie knock at her door. She checks it out. There's nobody out there. Eventually, an even heavier knock happens, and she walks outside with, I believe, some pepper spray and sees that her vehicle has been vandalized and somebody has used red paint to write "witch" on it. Now, I will say, while I don't hate the fact that this happened, I would have preferred that they didn't use the word witch, because to me, that was way too on the nose of foreshadowing. As soon as I saw her car and painted with the name witch, my mind immediately started to think about 17 missing kids. Okay, well, maybe she's going to end up being revealed as the person, but that does make me think that witchcraft is at play here, like children are being drained or something like that, which ends up being exactly what happens. And, does it derail the movie? Is it a disappointment for me? Does it show its hand a little bit too soon and take major points off? No, not at all. But I do wish that it would have been something else. Even just saying bitch instead of witch, I think would have been enough. I think that actually would have added a little bit of comedic value in there. But the fact that they put witch, that was one of the few times where I felt like the foreshadowing was a little bit too deliberate for my taste. But nonetheless, car's vandalized. She goes the next day to the police station. She tries to scrub it off herself, and I believe she's like showing, or no, she's in the school parking lot showing somebody, I believe. And then she looks through the chain link fence and she sees Alden Ehrenreich's character, who is Paul, and she kind of has this little flirty wave with him. He doesn't really seem to respond much. Later on, she ends up at this bar where, she's continuing on her little trip into the bottle, and Paul meets her there, and very quickly you learn that they have a bit of a past. Maybe they said this outright, but you kind of get up the hint that maybe they were in a relationship at some point, and now they're not. They're exes. And she starts to basically push him and pressure him into drinking as well. And he keeps refusing it. And in the moment, I wasn't sure if that's because he's in recovery and used to be an alcoholic and now he doesn't want to go back down that road, or if he knows where alcohol is going to lead and so he's not trying to go down that road with her. But nonetheless, he very directly, kind of shuts down a lot of her advances, and then it hard cuts to him the next morning waking up in her bed while she's kind of up in the, playing a little joke on him where she's playing this music to wake him up, but also has this very kind of satisfied, victorious smile on her. And, this is the first time where I realized that Justine and maybe all the other characters are going to be very flawed individuals and flawed characters. And that was something that I really appreciated about the movie. I don't think I mentioned that in my spoiler-free review because I didn't want to give too many direct details, but I like the fact that every single one of the characters that we meet here, maybe except for Alex, is a very flawed character. They have very huge reasons why, on the surface, you probably wouldn't like them as a person, but the movie kind of justifies why they're that way, either through the grief or, some kind of personality flaw with them that still kind of makes you endeared to them. So even at this point, I'm like, okay, damn, she forced him to drink, she pushed him until he gave in, and then she fucked him. Interesting. I wonder where this is going to go. And essentially, she starts to follow Alex home. She has this curiosity of how he is because she's not teaching in the moment. She's on a leave of absence from the event and he's being taught by a different teacher. So she follows Alex, who's the one kid that did not disappear, and sees that he walks into his house and all of the windows and everything are blocked by newspaper, which is very peculiar. So she kind of cases the house and walks around, and you get one of the better scares of the movie where you see this little slit where the paper isn't covering just enough to peek your eyes through. And so she looks and the house seems dark and she's kind of looking around, and all of a sudden you see the silhouette of two people, and a really creepy moment where she jumps back and then looks in, and it's presumably Alex's parents just sitting there on the couch in like some kind of catatonic state. And so this very much tips her off that something weird is going on. And she ends up stumbling over like a trash can on her way out. And she contacts Benedict Wong's character, Marcus, and says, hey, like I followed Alex home to try to see if he was okay. There's something weird going on with his parents and the whole house is barricaded. And don't you think we should check this out? And Marcus's first response is just telling her to leave him alone. Like, don't make the situation worse. Don't give off any kind of a weird vibe like you're stalking these kids. It's just going to make things worse for you when people already think you're guilty of something. And he's right. And eventually she kind of breaks him down where he's like, fine, I'll look into it. And then Justine goes to a liquor store. And this was one of my favorite sequences of the film just because of the way that the camera moves, where she walks into this liquor store and you see somebody in the distance behind her that is very clearly following her. It's another woman. And what I love about it is the camera keeps following her down these different aisles and these different turns that she's making. And so you only get glimpses of this woman behind her following her. Enough to know that she's there, but not enough to know how close she is, if she's got anything with her, a weapon, whatever. And so you just get like these like real tense views of like, oh, something's going to happen here. And it ends up being Paul's wife who, bashes her in the head with something and starts screaming at her. You're like, oh my God, you fucked him. And she's like, no, I didn't. Lying bitch. So yeah, Paul's wife was not happy. If I remember correctly, it was at this point too, where Justine has a dream, and it's where she's going to school to, start her day. And she walks into the classroom and every single one of the kids are there, but their heads are down and it's all painted in like these grays. And everybody stays that way except for Alex, who's the one kid that did not disappear, where he slowly lifts his head up and he's got some form of clown makeup on. And then Justine wakes up, like kind of jolted out of bed, and then looks at the ceiling, and there's this really creepy woman with the same clown makeup staring at her, and she freaks out and wakes up again. It's like a dream within a dream. And so you'll have dreams kind of being a recurring thing here. And so obviously, the clown makeup is something that's significant that we're supposed to pay attention to because there's two images back to back that show that, as well as this creepy woman, which is like, who the fuck is this? Eventually, she starts to follow Alex again and actually talks with him. And he seems very uncomfortable with the fact that she is talking to him, and then eventually just yells at her, don't follow me, which sets a little bit of alarm bells off that, of course, besides the catatonic parents, that there's something really sinister going on in that house. And Alex is probably closely tied to whatever's happening here, much more than Justine is. And you get what I would say is the creepiest moment of the film, where after he says this to her, she parks her car and basically does like this stakeout on the house to see if anybody goes in or anybody comes out. And at some point in the night, because she's drinking, she passes out and she's asleep. And you get this shot, a shot that actually happens a couple times in the movie, where the front door of this house just opens really slowly and the entire inside is just painted in darkness. And you just sit there, like, not even blinking, kind of gripping your chair for a second, like, what the fuck is about to come out of that house? That happens multiple times in the film. So that was a really great shot choice to reuse in the movie. But eventually this woman comes out, Alex's mother presumably, with a pair of scissors. And she's like walking all fucking weird, like she's almost being like puppet on a string. Comes all the way up to the front of the vehicle and then looks to the side window with Justine asleep and then goes out of frame. And all of a sudden you hear the trunk open. Or the back door or something. And that was a moment where it was like, oh, what's going to happen? And then the shot just lingers on Justine the entire time while we're just hearing things. This is all tension built through sound design brilliantly. And so you see her dead ass asleep, and then all of a sudden you just see the scissors come up by her. And you're like, oh, they're going to cut her ear off. They're going to slit her throat. What's going to happen? Is she going to wake up? And all they do is clip off a lock of her hair, and then the scissors go back out of frame, and then her chapter closes. And you're left there going, what the fuck? What was that? And that was something that by the time this happens the second time in Archer's story, which we're about to get into, I had worried myself, like, am I going to like this? Because this is serious dick teasing, where as soon as something really crazy happens, you cut it off, and now we go back and go way back in time and talk about somebody else entirely. I was like, this is either going to pay off big or it's going to frustrate the shit out of me. Luckily, it paid off big. So then we move into Archer, who is Josh Brolin's character, who's a father of one of the missing kids. And what's established very early on whenever we start his story is that he is very grief-stricken about his son's disappearance, and he is not getting over it. And he's sleeping in his son's room. There's a point where his wife comes in and opens the door, and it seems like she's kind of moved on, or at least is trying to pretend that, you know, we're going to get back to normal, where he's just consumed by the entire thing. And so he gets up, goes to work, and he's getting basically called out by one of his people. He's like a contractor that he's just fucking up left and right. He's ordering the wrong shit. You know, he's not meeting deadlines. And so they have this thing where they've ordered the wrong paint for the door, and they painted it red when it's supposed to be green, I believe. And so he takes the leftover paint, puts it in his truck, and you're like, okay. So he's the one who wrote witch on her car. And I believe the next time we catch up with him is at this rally, which is what opened up the movie, where, you know, you're having Justine, all the other parents talk, and then it shows kind of his perspective where he's pointing the finger at her and wants to know more, and watches her get escorted away on her vehicle, and he kind of follows her to her house, which is obviously when he paints her car and kind of knocks on the door to fuck with her. At some point, it shows Archer watching the security footage of his kid leaving the house, where he just basically plays it over and over, where his kid runs out of the house with his arms open into the woods and then disappears. And he keeps rewinding it, trying to find any little detail that he can follow up on to maybe get an idea of where he's going. And then at some point, we have another dream sequence where Archer dreams about the night that his kid leaves the house, where, you know, the door opens and he tries to follow his kid out and follows him into the darkness, and he's gone, turns around and looks at his house, and he looks up in the sky. And this is the most hotly debated moment in the film, because honestly, it's the moment in the film that has the least amount of explanation. And I think that's very deliberate. There's even been questions asked directly to Zach Cregger, and I think he's given answers along the lines of, like, I don't know, it's whatever you think it is. I don't know what the fuck it means, which is a frustrating answer, but it's whatever. Where he looks above his house, and suddenly this image of an assault rifle shows up. And on the barrel of the assault rifle, the time 2:17 pops up, which is the time that all the kids disappeared, almost like an alarm clock. And then he ends up back inside in his son's bedroom, and it sees that his son is laying in bed, and his son turns around and stares at him. And then all of a sudden the image changes to this woman with the clown makeup. And there's a lot of different thoughts on this one scene. Honestly, this one scene is the one thing that I'm most like up in the air about on whether I like or not. Now, The actual visual of this rifle appearing in the sky and the clock and everything, I thought that was done very well. It was a cool little surreal dream sequence. But I don't know what the fuck that image means. Like, of course, you could take it at face value and say, oh, it's a weapon, and the movie's about kids being used or people being used as weapons, and that's the title of the film, and that's as deep as it gets. Maybe. I mean, that is the easiest interpretation of it, and I even thought that in the theater, but to me, immediately my brain rejected it because it's like, that's so on the nose. Like, for a movie this good, that feels almost elementary to have just a blatant weapon just show up in the sky for unexplained reasons to connect you to the theme of the movie. I don't know. I don't like that. I've seen some other speculation about maybe some things that influenced Zach Kreger. Of course, you know, the whole gun violence debate that's been ramped up quite a bit over the last 10 years with assault rifles being used in schools specifically, and certain dates and numbers with certain stories that line up with that with legislature. I don't even know if it goes that deep, but if that's possible, I guess there's something somewhat interesting there if the movie had that theme or that commentary anywhere else in the film. But if we're trying to make a statement on gun violence or guns in schools or anything, it's weird to only have it be in that one kind of abstract image and then never brought up again in the movie. So I don't even like that one. And then there's, you know, some other things going on with a friend of Zach Kreger's passed away a couple of years ago, and that kind of lined up with the release of the film. I've seen some people try to tie it to that. I don't know. I haven't heard an explanation or thought of an explanation myself for this image that I am satisfied with. So my conclusion at the moment is that no matter what the reason of it being there, it's weird. I don't necessarily like it. The visual is cool, but it's this lingering question mark that's annoying for me, that I feel like there should be a more direct path to go down. And it's not an interesting enough piece of the story for me to sit there and really rack my brain on it. So not a huge fan of that moment. And also when we see the woman with the clown makeup in the bed again, to me, at that point, it's like, okay, well, obviously, at some point, we're going to get the answer that whoever the hell this woman is behind all of this. And again, thinking back to the witch, I'm like, she looks old and kind of fucked up. Maybe it's like a clown makeup on an old witch to make her look friendly to kids, like Pennywise or something. Like, this is the things that I'm starting to think of. And again, like, if she had just popped up in that one sequence in the ceiling, that would have been enough for me. The fact that she pops up twice with both parents, again, a little too deliberate with the foreshadowing. It doesn't derail the film. I think that the scare itself is really cool, but at that point it's like, okay, my alarm bells are fully ringing now for whoever this woman is, and you're taking away a little bit of the mystery of maybe it's one of these people that I'm following. At that point I'm like, well, it's whoever the fuck this chick with the clown makeup is. So the dream's over. And you get a great laugh, too. It was the biggest laugh in my theater where Josh Brolin jolts awake after seeing the woman with the clown makeup and goes, "What the fuck?" Because you don't often see that in movies where people wake up violently from a dream with, "Oh, what's going on?" Like, that's a real life reaction that somebody would have, that I would have. So I love that little moment of comedy there. Then this kind of motivates Archer to really kick up his investigation. So eventually he goes to one of the houses of the other missing kids, talks to the mom, asks if he can see the ring footage. She says no. He sits at the house and waits for the dad to show up, who ends up being Justin Long. Nice little nod to Barbarian there. And ends up convincing him to let him in and let him look at the ring footage. And when he looks at the footage, what he notices is, hey, your daughter left the house in the exact same way that my son did. Like, same pose, same posture, everything. That's something very weird there. Not only the fact that they left at the same time, they moved in the same way. And he starts to basically pinpoint. Like, he looks at the direction that his son went and draws this line on a map. And then he pinpoints the direction that this little girl went and draws a line on the map again. And figures, okay, they're both heading from different points of origin, but towards something. So whatever is in this little common area here is likely where these kids are going to be at. We need to figure out what the fuck that is. And after he figures this out, he's driving around. He ends up seeing Justine at a gas station. And so he pulls in to confront her. And this is where the movie really starts to get crazy, because they're sitting there having their little argument, and, you know, he's berating her, and then she just like trails off with their vision where she's like, what the fuck? And all of a sudden you see this grown ass man running at them with his arms out. And she's like, Marcus, the fuck? And then Benedict Wong comes in with a bloody face, these big bloodshot eyes that are like almost protruding from his skull, and almost like a zombie from 28 Days Later, or an infected from 28 Days Later, starts to just maul the shit out of her, and gets to the point where, you know, he's trying to kill her, trying to choke her out, and Josh Brolin's trying to fight and, you know, help her. She runs into the store. Benedict Wong ends up attacking Josh Brolin, and then that story gets cut off. And the thing that I will say is that I thought Josh Brolin's performance, probably because I'm a dad and I relate more to his character, I thought it was outstanding. I would have liked to have spent even more time with his character, and I'll kind of revisit that point here in a second. Because then the character that we're introduced to is Paul, who all we've seen so far is that he's a cop, and he's the guy that had an affair, one night stand with Justine. And so it kind of establishes his story very clearly, showing that he is a recovering alcoholic, where, you know, he has a conversation with his wife where she's kind of like berating him a little bit about it. Like, hey, don't fuck up. Remember, we're trying to recover from all this. And so he goes to work, and I believe his father-in-law is like the chief of police. And so he's very much like under the thumb of his wife's family to a certain degree while he's trying to keep things in check. It's left a little bit ambiguous on if he became a cop after his recovery or what the timeline of all that is. But nonetheless, it's not specifically important. And you're quickly led into this situation where he's patrolling around and he looks down an alley and sees somebody seemingly breaking into a building. And so he gets on his little walkie, and the guy takes off running. And so he's chasing him, ends up catching up with him and pursues him on foot, takes him down, you know, and he's handling him like very friendly at this moment, where he's like, okay, come on. Like, he's not being violent. He's not being, you know, any kind of like aggressive cop, just sticking to the book. And then he puts the guy up against the car and starts to do his search and asks, like, hey, do you have any weapons on you? No. Do you have any, you know, drugs on you? No. Do you have anything in your pockets that's going to prick me or stab me? No. And he sticks his hands in his pockets. Oh, it comes out, and he's stabbed in the finger, and there's a used needle in there. And he looks at this and then looks up at the guy, the junkie that he just pulled over, and just pow, just fucking clocks him, which I got a laugh out of because it was so sudden. And it was like, oh yeah, I mean, it's probably a reasonable reaction, even though like, a cop shouldn't do that, but just like, motherfucker. I got a laugh at that. And so now he's panicked because obviously he's like, oh fuck, do I have AIDS? Do I have hepatitis? Like, what does this mean? This is people die this way. And then he very quickly starts to panic because holy shit, I just knocked a fucking citizen out with my car, you know, the dash cam going, and it caught the whole thing. So he unplugs all that, starts to panic, starts to reason with the guy that he just knocked the fuck out as he wakes him up, saying, hey, like, hey, you know, you ran from me, I stabbed my finger, I fucking clocked you, I'm gonna let you go and we're even, all right? Just don't fucking come around my office anymore, otherwise there's gonna be problems. So, okay, cool, the guy leaves. And then Paul is so worried and distraught about not only his health with the finger prick, but also with the possible implications of him assaulting somebody unprompted, that he immediately confesses everything to his father-in-law. Basically, he's going to keep it hush unless the guy makes a complaint, and at that point, the fucking fire started. And he's just got so much going on that that's what eventually leads him to meet Justine at this bar and be in this vulnerable state, which, again, kind of quickly hard cuts to him pounding her into the mattress and waking up the next day hungover and fucked up, and tries to go home, and ends up finding that his wife came home a little bit early, and very quickly she deduces that, you know, he's been drinking, and presumably he, you know, confesses to sleeping with her as well, which is what leads her to confront Justine in the liquor store. And you know, he goes back to work at some point after all of this, that day where he's all hungover, and this is where he walks outside and he sees this guy James, this drug addict, walking towards the precinct, and he's like, what the fuck, what'd I tell you? And then the guy runs and he starts chasing him, and then that story cuts off. I think Alden Ehrenreich's performance is good. I think that there is, between the two stories here of Paul and then James, which we're about to talk about, I think there's a lot of great moments there between them. And I think that his place in the story is important. But I will say Paul's chapter was the least interesting of all of them to me. And I don't know specifically where I would cut things from him, but I do wish some of his screen time would have been given to characters I was more interested in, specifically Josh Brolin. I wanted a lot more out of Josh Brolin. So Paul was the chapter that I thought was fine, but was the one that I was least engaged with, which unfortunately is right during that little middle section of the film where you really start to maybe feel the runtime a little bit for those that thought the film was way too long. Then we get the character of James, who is the drug addict that just had this run-in with Paul. And, it shows him trying to smoke on a crack pipe and, trying to get any little bit of anything to ignite. He's all out of drugs, ends up stealing a kid's backpack, tries to pawn it off. The guy doesn't want it. It's like a little tablet and like bullshit kid headphones. And so this ends up leading to the moment where he meets Paul, where he's trying to break in to this building, goes for on chase, gets knocked the fuck out, and ends up with this gigantic welt in his face where Paul hit him, and eventually goes and sees Alex's house that is all taped up with newspaper, so it seems like maybe it's abandoned. So he ends up breaking into that house, starts stealing a bunch of silverware and anything he can get his hands on. And then at some point while he's ransacking, he turns around and sees the same two parents in the catatonic state that Justine saw. And holy shit, jumps backwards, freaks out, and then realizes that they're just dead to the entire world. And so he continues ransacking and ends up finding himself in the basement where he never turns the light on, but gets just enough light to see a number of kids just standing in the basement. And so now we have our answer. That is where all the kids are, is the basement of Alex Lilly's house. And he freaks the fuck out, tries to run out of the house. The parents suddenly are like activated and get up and start to struggle with him a bit. He gets the fuck out of Dodge and ends up back at the pawn shop stealing or trying to pawn off all the stuff that he just stole, and sees the reward poster for all 17 of these missing kids. And it's like, holy fuck, I know where they're at. But now he's in this conundrum of, how do I report this without getting into more trouble with this cop I just had this run in on, or getting arrested myself for looking like I'm clearly on meth, or anything else, and am I actually going to get the reward money? James was a very comedic character to watch how he interacts and how he figures things out. But eventually he ends up going back to the police station because he calls and gets the info. He goes there to give the information. That's where he has his run-in with Paul. So then Paul gives chase to James, and he eventually darts through different places, ends up going all the way back into the woods where he has his little tent with all his paraphernalia. And there's another moment where we get to see Gladys, where he looks and there's this person off in the woods. She's in the distance and she's kind of like waving at him like this. And this was very like Pennywise to me, almost like where he's waving at the kids inside of the water with the balloon, especially in the 1990 ones. And so this is another moment where yet again, it's like, okay, whoever the fuck this chick with the clown makeup on, is the source of all this. Creepy little image though. And so he goes into the tent and, zips it up. And another really great tense moment where he's sitting there and he's using these little needles and he's holding it. And all you get is this silhouette of somebody that walks up to the tent and goes down and starts to unzip it. And very quickly, like as soon as he does that, he darts out and ends up being Paul, and he stabs him in the face with these needles. And Paul freaks the fuck out and then drags him away to the to his vehicle. He ends up telling Paul, like, hey, I'm just here to report. I know where these kids are. I know where these kids are. Don't beat the fuck out of me. And so he tells Paul where. Paul pulls up, goes up to the front door, knocks on it, and then yet again you have a similar shot where the door opens. You don't see anybody interacting with him, and then he walks into this darkness and just kind of disappears, and the door slowly closes. And then hours go by before he ever comes out. And James is flipping out in the back of the police car, trying to get the fuck out of there. And then suddenly the door opens again. He's like, oh, thank God. And again, painted in darkness. And then all of a sudden, Paul just emerges from the darkness like a bullet, just running right towards the car, and grabs James out of the back seat, drags him inside by his feet. And that's the end of James's story. I think the comedic value of James's story makes Paul's chapter a little bit more entertaining. He was definitely kind of the comedic relief of the movie in many ways. And I thought it was a really cool way they revealed where the kids were. It was a creepy shot of just kind of getting a little bit of daylight that's pouring down the stairs, and you see a couple of kids in a row. And yet again, now you know where the kids are, but you're like, why are they there? What the fuck is going on? Like, why are they just standing there? Like, what's going on with the parents? What the hell is happening in this fucking house? And how is Alex involved with all of this? So a movie that does a great job at just giving you all these questions, and you spend the whole runtime just going, why? And every time you get an answer, there's another question that you have. And so we move on to Marcus, who is Benedict Wong's character, the principal. And so I believe it starts off with him taking a call from Justine, the one where she's like, hey, I found Alex's, his house and shit's all fucking covered in newspaper. What the hell's going on here? And so he calls the meeting with Alex's parents, and he's sitting in his office, and his, the secretary or whatever comes in and says, hey, you're 2 o'clock's here. And suddenly you just see this silhouette that's obscured by this, pane of glass that's painted over. And it's just this red wig. As she comes in, you're like, oh, there's that creepy bitch right there. We're going to figure out who she is. And she comes in and sits down and is immediately just very jovial, like almost clown-like. And the more that Gladys was talking, I was looking and I'm like, is that Shanice from Uncle Buck? Holy shit, I haven't seen her in forever. And she's been doing a ton of stuff. I looked it up when I reviewed it the first time, but I had only seen her in, Uncle Buck, a few other things in the 80s. And then I think Gone Baby Gone was the last time I saw her. So it was cool to like peer through the makeup and like, oh my God, that fucked up red wig. That's Shanice. And so, yeah, she introduces herself as Gladys, and she's like, hey, I'm Gladys. I'm, Alex's aunt, and I'm taking care of the family. The parents have fallen ill. I saw that we had this meeting, so I came in here. And very clearly, her motive in this scene is to get Benedict Wong, Marcus, to drop any suspicion, to drop any kind of concern for Alex. But he presses saying, like, hey, I understand it's unfortunate whatever's happening with the parents, but I need them to come in and talk to me. Otherwise, I have to report this to the authorities because there's been some odd behavior. And given what happened a month ago, I can't just let some of this stuff go. And there was a great shot where she's talking to him and she looks down and sees these ribbons and then looks back at him. And in the moment, you're like, the fuck is the deal with the ribbons? That's a bit of foreshadowing that I liked because you have no way to discern what exactly is the significance of that shot, but it's very deliberate in showing you it. So that's going to come into play at some point. Loved Amy Madigan's performance. I thought it was just the right amount of kind of disarming with her charm, but also very kind of kooky and eccentric. And then eventually gets very dark and sinister as the movie goes on. So this is where we're introduced to the chick that has been in all of these dreams. And I got to be honest with you, like, again, I love the movie. I really do. I'm curious if I would have liked it more if we take Gladys out of these dream sequences. And rather than have these, multiple points in the movie where they're showing her face, which is, at that point is letting you know, like, this is the person who is the source of all this evil. And then whenever she shows up at the school, it's like, there she is. And not having any kind of questions left at that point as far as who is at fault for all of this. I wonder if it would have been better to have Gladys be in the background of all these different stories where, she's there doing the interview with Alex in the beginning, the intro. It's like a blink and you'll miss it thing where she's sitting there. Maybe have her at the rally that Justine and Archer have their little confrontation at. Maybe have her somewhere in the background of the shots where you can almost play like Who's Who or like Where's Waldo after you watch the movie and like, oh shit, there's Gladys right there in the fucking library or something. I almost wish it was something like that where she's there, her presence is there, but it's not quite as, in your face. The movie's not trying to show you like, remember this face because it's going to be important later. And then it shows Marcus at his house on like a Saturday, Sunday, whatever, and he's sitting there with his husband, presumably, watching some TV. And there's an interesting thing here that I did not necessarily pick up on in the theater. Earlier on in the film, I can't remember if it was during a flashback where she's actually teaching or if it was during the dream sequence where she goes into the school, but the lesson that's up on the chalkboard is about parasites. And when you meet Benedict Wong's character and his husband, they're watching like this nature documentary on cordyceps, Last of Us reference. And cordyceps is another form of like parasitic, plant life, fungus or whatever. And so now two very deliberate little visual allegories there for the parasitic nature of how this evil is getting into these kids and these different people and using them as puppets to do their bidding. So I thought that was cool. That's something that, again, is in the background. If you want to notice it, it's there. If you don't want to, it's innocuous enough. You just kind of move on. But there's a ring at the doorbell, and it's none other than Gladys. And Benedict Wong is very put off. Like, what are you doing here? Like, hey, this is my day off. This is my home. We're not here to have any kind of school conversations here. I need to talk to the parents. And then his dumbass husband is like, oh my God, dear, come inside. You look so fucking distraught. And in that moment, I'm like, God damn it. Somebody fucking tell that bitch to leave. And so she's basically feigning, that she's been left out there at the bus stop, and she's feigning exhaustion and dehydration and stuff. And so the husband's like, oh my, come inside. And Benedict Wong just knows something's up with her. They go into the kitchen. And then here's red flag number 2, where she's like, I need some water. And he's like, okay. And she goes to get a glass. And she goes, no, I need it in a bowl. The fuck? What? And she goes, yeah, it's just like a little quirk of mine. At that point, leave. Fuck no. I ain't giving you no damn water bowl. What are you, a dog? But he does. And so he fills the bowl with water and gives it to her. And then she pulls out this little stick out of her little bag, and it's like a thorny stick, and she's talking with them, and she's asking Benedict Wong, like, hey, I know I'm trying to get the parents over. I know you said that you're anxious and you're gonna notify the authorities. You haven't done that yet, have you? And she deliberately asks him like 2 or 3 more times, like, so you haven't notified them? And he's like, no, I haven't notified them. Like, get the fuck out of my house. And then she stabs her hand with this thorny stick, cuts her hand open, and starts to rub the blood all over it. At this point, Benedict Wong ain't having no more of this. And even the husband's starting to get weirded out, like, oh my God, get the first aid kit. And he's like, how about you get the first aid kit at somebody else's fucking house? Get out of here. And then she ends up, the stick is wrapped up with his ribbons. He notices it, and you're like, oh, so that's where the ribbons are. So it's going to, like, what is she going to control him? Because he was freaking out. Like, you start to put these things together. And then she rings this little bell. And as soon as she rings it, he's like, and just starts shaking. He's in like this catatonic little fugue state. Husband starts to get worried. Just before that, actually, kind of a moment where she pulls out those big ass scissors and she goes snip while Benedict Wong can see it. And this is where he gets to the point where he's about to kick her out when she rings the bell. And when she takes his hair, the husband's hair, and starts to wrap it around a stick and then snaps it. As soon as she snaps it, he fucking flies towards this guy and starts mauling the shit out of him. And you get a really grisly scene where he literally beats his husband's skull in with his own skull, just headbutts him until it's nothing but a crater. And that's where he gets like that very swollen look in his face. And then she dunks it in the water, which kind of like negates whatever her command was. And I love the visual storytelling in this moment where you understand the lore and how everything works. And some of it's classic witchcraft elements. Some of it's a little bit different, especially having like a personal item that ties to the person. That's classic. But a very cool moment where you suddenly get so much information dumped on you at once of like, okay, if it wasn't already clear, clearly this bitch is the one that's in charge of all this, whatever the fuck's happening to these kids and this town, and she's controlling people, and so that's how the parents are catatonic, and she clearly drew the kids there. Like, you're starting to like put together all these things in your head in this one scene. And then she pulls out the little golden lock from Justine that was snipped off of her hair in the beginning of the film, wraps it around the stick, and breaks it. And so then Benedict Wong just fucking takes off like a rocket and flies downtown like doing this shit. It's a creepy image, but it's also kind of funny that everybody's doing this shit with their arms and like, ah! So he's going for miles, just fucking clocking her ass. And then we end up back at what happened at the end of Archer's story, where he meets her at the finds her at the gas station and just starts trying to kill her. And we pick up where he starts to attack Josh Brolin, and then he ends up going inside, and you get a great little chase sequence in there where she's trying to escape, trying to get to the back door, and Benedict Wong's fucking chasing her and breaking shit and flying through glass. A great little comedic moment too where she's screaming for help and everything, and the guy is clearly trying to kill her. Then she goes by the front desk. He's like, get out of my store. And she's like, call the fucking cops, or whatever she says. Like, I'm being fucking attacked. Ends up going back out front, and Josh Brolin intervenes again, trying to take him down while she gets in her car and takes off. And then Benedict Wong flies after her And you get a really creepy visual where Josh Brolin's chasing. You see him just darting, and then all of a sudden, doop, just gets taken out by a car, and his head's turned into mush. And then Justine and Archer end up reconciling at the hospital, and basically are agreeing that they need to work together. And he shows her the information that he has about the map, and she looks at where this little circle of where these points converge, and she goes, Alex Lilly's house is in that circle. That's got to be what's going on with all this stuff. And then we start the chapter of Alex, and this is where you get even more answers. This is basically like your explanation dump, where it shows Alex Lilly way back before, a month previous, before all this stuff started to happen. And he's a kind of a quiet kid. He's getting bullied, most notably by Archer's son. I thought that was going to play into the movie a little bit more by the end of it. It never really gets brought up again, but nonetheless, you have Archer's son who's being bullied. Maybe there's something to be said there about, if they said it, I missed it, where maybe Josh Brolin was like a workhorse and kind of an absent father until his son disappeared, and so it hurt him even more because he wasn't there, and now he's like distraught. And the absent father leads his son to be kind of a little prick. But nonetheless, he's bullied by Archer's son, and his dad picks him up from school, and they're kind of having a good little moment. And he says, "Yeah, Aunt Gladys is gonna be staying with us tonight." And the kid's like, "Who the fuck is Aunt Gladys?" And peers out his window that night and sees the dad helping this frail-looking woman who can't even walk into the house and carrying her bag and stuff. They tell him, leave Aunt Gladys alone. She's sick. And you have this moment where he looks into the crack of the door and kind of looks at her feet. This was the most obvious jump scare of the movie, where he's goes from her feet and starts to track all the way up the body, and then eventually gets to the head, and she's sitting there looking at him like this, and she looks near death, like she's got hours left. Wakes up the next day, goes to school, and mom and dad aren't there to pick him up. He's like, what the fuck? Okay. And so he walks all the way home and sees his parents are like catatonic basically while still communicating at the kitchen table. And Aunt Gladys is suddenly up walking around. She still looks a little frail. She still doesn't look healthy. And she's got like this little wrap on her head, but she's at least walking around. And you have a scene where Alex is very confused. He doesn't understand what's going on. He's calling bullshit. And he's like, why my parents don't act this way? What's going on here? What are you hiding? And she does the little trick with the stick and basically starts making the parent, they grab this fork and start stabbing their face with the fork. And the kid freaks out. And she makes it clear to him, like, they're under my control. And I can make them do whatever I want. I can make them kill each other. I can make them eat each other. I can make them kill you. And I'll do it if you tell anybody that I'm here. And that was a great moment for Amy Madigan's performance, because previous to all this, she's just kind of this really kooky, eccentric lady. Even in that sinister moment, she's breaking the sticks and making Benedict Wong do everything. She's still very kind of kooky. And in this moment, it's just very dark, stoic, sinister. So, she's not going to get like Oscar consideration or anything like that. It's not like the Substance or anything where suddenly people are going to be like, holy shit, but great performance. And then, so you end up with this situation where Alex is going to school every single day and coming home with his parents still in the same spot, and they're not feeding themselves, they're not using the bathroom or anything, presumably, although they don't really address that. And she basically makes Alex feed them soup every single day to at least keep them alive. And very clearly, she's draining the life force out of them to try to rejuvenate herself. And you get a little bit of backstory with her saying that, she's been sick for a very long time. I think she says in this moment something about her, Alex's father having consumption, which I didn't pick up on that in the moment, but I've, done some research after seeing the film, obviously. And consumption was a term used in like the 1700s for what eventually is now referred to as tuberculosis. So that was like a very, very sly little moment there to let you know how old she is, that she's hundreds of years old. And so she's trying to drain the life force out of these parents. And then it comes to a point where she tells him, your parents aren't giving me enough. I'm not getting what I need from them. I need more. And basically tells him, I need you to go to school and bring me something, a personal item from every single one of your classmates. And obviously the kid doesn't want to do this, but then he asks her, like, so if you heal up and you get better, will you leave? And she says, of course. And so he kind of chooses in that moment to sacrifice all of the people at school that treat him like shit in order to maybe get his life back. Which was a good moment there. The fact that, they put this kid in this moral situation here that doesn't make him unlikable. It makes him more, it's like, okay, I would understand a kid making that choice. So he goes to school at a certain point. He gets a moment to kind of dart away while everybody's in like phys ed or something to try to find a personal item. He ends up taking all the name tags off of their totes. And I did find it funny, although it's not something that bothered me at all. I found it funny that you get Justine that comes in and is like, "Hey, what are you doing in here?" And like she doesn't notice that all the name tags are gone, like right where he's standing. Nonetheless, not an issue, just something I noticed. And so he takes these name tags home, and Gladys is tearing it up, and it looked like she was putting it in the soil of this tree that she's getting all these branches off of. And it shows that she, basically snaps this twig that is now, mixed with the earth of all of their belongings. And that is why all the kids get up at the same exact moment at 2:17 a.m. and fly towards her. And there's a great shot where her and Alex stand outside of this door. Again, same door, wide open with this darkness painted inside of it, as these kids start to, one by one come into frame as they're all running into the house like sheep. And so then Alex now has to start feeding all of them soup while they just stand in the basement as she's draining their life force. And the more that she gets, the more that she starts to get her hair back. It shows at one point she's got like little strands, and then she ends up having a full head of white hair. She uses the red wig to cover all of that. She starts to use the makeup, which is just the perfect amount of too much makeup and done terribly to make her look really fucking weird. And that's where you get the Gladys that we are first introduced to, where she's a lot more lively, got more personality. She's a lot more present and can kind of play a character to a degree. And then eventually Justine and Archer find their way back to this house. And there's a spot where at some point she has the parents in front of her bedroom door, and she's going into her bedroom and she tells Alex, "Don't cross the salt." And as soon as Justine and Archer go into the house, there's a salt line down there where she steps over it. And as soon as she steps over the salt line, Paul and James are just activated, and they start to attack both of them. And so you get a really nasty scene in the kitchen where Paul is fighting with Justine, and she literally takes a potato or a vegetable peeler and peels off pieces of his face, which is like a graduation from the cheese grater scene in Evil Dead Rise. So I've seen it a number of the press screenings they did where they gave out little peelers, which is pretty cool. So if there's a signature gore moment in this movie, I guess that would be it. And then you have James fighting with Archer, and another great comedic moment where he keeps like fucking throwing him across the room or knocking him down, and then he's like down for a second, and then gets back up, and it happens like 6 times where he's like, "Jesus fucking Christ, just stay down." So they get both of them down. And, Justine is still kind of doing whatever she's doing in the kitchen, trying to get away from Paul. And she eventually takes the gun away from Paul and doesn't want to do it, obviously, because she has like some affinity for him. And she ends up shooting him in the head and just taking him out. And then she's able to save Archer, who's fighting with James yet again at the top of the stairs. And she, pops him in the head. And so now they're both taken out. Archer goes downstairs, finds all the kids in the basement. He's using his cell phone to like look through all of them to find his son. And another jump scare that you could see coming a mile away where, he's darking around in the darkness. And then all of a sudden you see Gladys like in the fucking corner. And then he yells, she jumps at the camera. And then Justine is walking around trying to figure out what the fuck is going on. And then suddenly Archer is the one who's activated, where very quickly, I guess Gladys was able to take something from him and get him under her spell. And Archer starts to try to kill Justine. While at the same time, upstairs during all of this, Alex stepped over the salt line and his parents were activated to start chasing him, which you get a very direct callback to, or a very direct reference to The Shining. And I'm pretty sure that Zach Kreger said The Shining was an influence, so it's not like a secret thing. He pretty much wears it on his sleeve. But, where the mom's busting her head through the door and looking at him, and you get a very kind of similar shot of Jack Nicholson with the "Here's Johnny" moment. And at some point Alex is able to get away and gets a hold of the plant that Gladys is using to power all these things, and goes to her wig and is able to get one of her hairs out of it and wraps it around, puts his blood on it, and then snaps the stick with the one that is from the earth that all these kids are being controlled by. And so he snaps the stick. And when he snaps it, like Gladys is downstairs watching Archer choke the life out of Justine. And she's like talking a little bit of shit. And all of a sudden snap. And she's like, oh no. And this was the best conclusion, where suddenly all 17 of these kids are like, oh, they just dart towards her. And this old frail woman who could barely even walk is now just hauling ass through the neighborhood. And the kids just fucking pour busting through all the glass windows, which is a hilarious visual, where, you know, they're just one goal. We're going to fuck this chick up. And so you get all these great moments where she's running through a stranger's house and then the kids run through it. And you got a guy mowing and then he looks and she's fucking running and screaming between his houses. All of a sudden the 17 kids are chasing after. Great comedic moments here. And then they eventually catch up to her, and a great camera movement too, where they're staying on the little girl as she jumps through, you know, the doors and busts through windows as they're chasing Gladys. Really well done. And the little girl eventually gets Gladys, knocks her down. The kids get to her, and they just start fucking tearing her ass apart. And this is where you get the goriest moment of the movie, and it should be the goriest moment, where they start to, I don't know if they were eating her or they were pulling her apart, everything, a little bit of everything. And suddenly the skin's popping and limbs are popping, and her fucking face gets pulled in half. And you get this great overhead shot of all these kids just mauling at her, and there's limbs just sitting everywhere in this pool of blood. And as soon as they rip her head off and she's dead, everybody kind of snaps out of this. Everybody that she's affected. All the kids are standing there. Archer stops killing Justine. Everybody else is dead, so they can't really come back from it. And then you have Archer, who follows the trail of destruction, and you get another great joke where the husband's out front like, holy fucking shit, you got to see what happened out here. And the wife's like, oh my God. And then all of a sudden Josh Brolin's there. She's like, there's a man in the kitchen. He finds all the kids, finds his son, picks him up, holds him, and then it very quickly just wraps up, where you get the image of him holding him, and you get Justine goes upstairs and she sees Alex, who's hugging his parents that are like still kind of catatonic, and she has like this satisfied look on her face. And the voiceover from the beginning picks up, basically saying that that the parent, everything, the Gladys was taken out and situation was over, but the parents never recovered. They are now in an institution, and Alex has gone to live with a much nicer aunt outside of town. And years later, only some of the kids started to talk again, and then the movie just ends. And I did feel it ended very abruptly. Like, the story's over. All the plot lines are satisfied. It's not like there's still these lingering things that were very integral that had to be answered or shown on screen. But it did feel very abrupt. After you get the big gore scene where Gladys is torn apart, it felt like 15 seconds later, the movie's just done. And I didn't think that was the most satisfying way to do it. I wish we got a little bit more of an epilogue, a little bit more information. But I still like the movie as is. It just felt very sudden to me in a way that was a little frustrating. I also kind of wish we got a chapter with Gladys's perspective. Now, I don't know what other information we would have gotten aside from maybe backstory, maybe showing her in the 1600s or something, or maybe showing her finding her way into manipulating her way into Alex's house. Maybe that would have been enough for me. Again, as is, we get all the information we need about Gladys. There's plenty that is deliberately told to us. There's plenty there that's left for us to interpret and figure things out on our own. And I do think that it's satisfying. But I guess because I like the movie and I like the character so much, I did want a little bit more, which is only a compliment to the film.
No, but you don't. Would you just let me get.
So I said that in my review, where there was one main character who oddly didn't get their own chapter, and that was Gladys. And so, yeah, I just enjoyed her character, the mystery of everything, that I kind of wanted a chapter with a little bit of her backstory. Where it would have fit in, probably before Alex, I guess, maybe. I don't know. Maybe it wouldn't have worked at all. Again, this is just me spitballing. All the issues I have with this film are ones that I'm not very solidified on. It's like, maybe that would be a good idea. Maybe it would make the movie worse. I really don't know. But yeah, so the little bit of epilogue that we get there, the little information that we get, I mean, not that this is hard to come up with, but the way that I looked at it is that the more life force that the Gladys drains from a human being, the less likely they are to return to their normal state. You know, the parents she was feeding on for weeks, and so they're just vegetables at this point. Some of the kids recovered, some of them didn't, so I'm assuming some of them were either just stronger than others or some of them got drained a little bit more than others. But you know, again, the information you got at the end, kind of a downer ending to a certain extent of like, we vanquished the evil, but we didn't really get much of a victory here. Interesting direction to not give us that happy ending of the kids like snapping out of it, like, why the fuck am I covered in blood and who's this dismembered bitch, daddy? It's a movie that definitely takes a few chances there, that I could see why it wouldn't work for everybody. I could see somebody really enjoying the movie and getting the satisfaction that Gladys gets torn apart by the kids, and then having that downer, very quick, abrupt ending kind of souring them on certain things. I do know some people that have not enjoyed this film. They haven't called that out specifically, but yeah, it's a really interesting movie. You know, I loved Barbarian. I really enjoyed this. I would say I enjoyed Barbarian more, especially initially. This has the potential to overtake it, though, over time. You know, I've only seen it one time, but I really did enjoy the film. So just a couple of things there that I was a little unsure about is that, you know, the identity of the narrator not being given to us, having Paul's chapter be maybe a little bit too long for how interesting of a character that he is, a little too much on the nose with some of the foreshadowing there, with showing Gladys so many times throughout the first 2 acts of the film, which take away a little bit of our ability to suspect other characters, putting witch on the car, tipping me off that this is probably going to be a witch story, and it felt very deliberate there, where it could have been something else, and left that a little bit more as a surprise. And then just the movie ending very abruptly. You know, satisfied the story, we got all the answers that we need, but kind of wanted a little bit more, which is a negative that's actually a good thing to hear. So that's all my thoughts on Weapons, guys. Let me know what your thoughts are on the movie. Any specific things in here that you liked or disliked. If you like any of the ideas that I had as far as taking Gladys out of the dream sequences and maybe just putting her in the background of certain things. Did you want a chapter dedicated to Gladys, or do you think that would have been way too much information and would have ruined some of the mystery there? Let me know all your thoughts, and we will talk about it down in the comments below. Well, that's it for this one, guys. If you enjoyed that, please click over here for all of my 2025 new release reviews. Well, that's it for this one, guys. Be sure to check out Rincon in the video description below. If you enjoyed that one, check out some more videos. My 2025 new release reviews are right over here. And I'm also going to put my review of Barbarian for you to check out, my thoughts on his previous film. Like, share, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss everything in the future. And as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.